Hello, this is Ken Bonacher, also known as BadKen in the BattleForge forums and Carch in the game. Recently on my Encounters with Twilight Expert Replay, YouTube user DogDude298 asked, any advice how to do this map on Expert with only the stuff from the free decks? That's interesting because I had been considering going back and looking at these Expert Replays again with using some different decks, and the Freebie deck is one of the more challenging ones I think that you could use. The reason is that it only comes with a very limited number of melee units. The melee units that it comes with are mostly small sized, at least until Era 4. And it has no crowd control whatsoever. So you can't really pin down things, though the relatively strong range units in the deck will be able to do damage to them. I made up the Freebie deck out of the cards that can come with the Play4Free version because the two decks that it comes with, Frost, Shadow, and Fire Nature decks, are kind of limited in scope and they only have 16 cards each. So the Freebie deck that I have here uses 20 cards and it uses all 4 elements actually, cards from all 4 elements, so it's a relatively strong deck, but of course there's no upgrades on it because it's the Play4Free deck that you start with. So I started off with Nature because Windweavers, of all the Tier 1 units that you get, Windweavers are probably the most flexible and powerful among the free decks. And I also brought in some Werebeasts to kind of pin down those early units while my Windweavers were doing damage to them. One of the trickier parts of this map is that when you get to this part here where the gate opens up, you start immediately getting these strong Era 3 Twilight Vilebloods attacking you, and they're really hard to deal with because they do a lot of damage and they leave a pile of toxic blood when they die that will really finish off your Era 1 and Era 2 units very quickly. So what I'm doing here is I don't have a very big force right now, so I'm being careful about going out, taking on a few units, and then running back. And if one of these Vilebloods shows up, I bring it back in so that Rogue and Kale can tank it for me. The only drawback to that is that after it dies, if you're not fighting it in the right place, Rogue and Kale will kind of wander back and forth across the Vileblood pool and damage himself. Not very smart. But I'm gradually building up my force. I've got a few Firestalkers now, and I'm using them in siege mode to do long range damage. They have very good range on them, and they do pretty significant damage with their exploding fireball attacks. They're one of the more powerful Era 2 units that you can get, actually, with the Play4Free deck. And they're perfect for taking out buildings like that Twilight Infestation right there, because they do the siege damage, of course. One thing to remember when you're playing with limited strength units like this, like if you're up against stronger units, or even in general on any expert map, is use healing and crowd control as much as possible. It really multiplies the strength of your units. Now, this deck, of course, doesn't have any crowd control, but I try to use healing as much as possible to keep my units alive and keep them doing damage, keep them in the game, so that I don't have to keep summoning more units, and you need to build up a big army as fast as you can to really take on the stronger units in this first part of the map. So far I've been able to take care of the patrols fairly well. I've cleared out the southwest area of the map. There was 2 towers and an infestation there, and I'm building up my 3rd orb, which is a shadow orb. Don't really pick up anything from the shadow orb there. I have in the deck there's a shadow insect at Era 3, and there's also the Stone of Torment, which I figured I'd try out here, but the problem is that these Twilight Whisperers here have actually more range than the Stone of Torment. So it's able to attack the Stone of Torment from range, and when I took my units in to attack it, they actually came in range of the Stone of Torment. It caused me a little trouble there, so that's the only Stone of Torment you'll be seeing in this replay. There I used a Lava Field spell to do some quick damage to that Vileblood and Whisper. And that's another thing to remember. In addition to healing, when you're dealing with weak units, you got to use every spell in your arsenal to do as much damage as possible, because these units aren't the strongest ones in the BattleForge arsenal. So using the spells to boost their damage dealing ability as much as possible is a good thing. Now I brought in a few Magma Hurlers and a Swamp Drake, and a couple more Swamp Drakes will be following there. And I'm just gradually moving ahead still now, putting towers ahead of my units so that the attackers will have something to focus on instead of my units, while my ranged units do damage on them. And the Vile Bloods keep coming, and the Whisperers keep coming. I'm getting a pretty strong force now at this point, though. There's some drones. Again, a melee unit, but a small melee unit, so not real useful against the Twilight Hags that have a knockback for small units. Trying to engage that Vile Blood as far away from my power well as possible when it comes in. That's another reason to put the towers in advance of the power well and to keep your units ready to go in. See there, I lost a tower instead of the power well. A lot less expensive because you get the void power back. Okay, so now I've slowed down the replay a little bit so you can see this big fight with the Twilight Abomination and his buddies. The Magma Hurlers have kind of advanced to start attacking the Twilight Hags. They first took out the Sky Scorcher Tower so that the Swamp Drakes could get in there. The Swamp Drakes do XL damage, so I want them on the Abomination as fast as possible. You can see they took it down pretty quickly. Another Vile Blood came in, but the Magma Hurlers with their little knockback have done some great damage against the Hags. The Hags weren't able to do too much to my Windweavers, so my Windweavers were able to help contribute to the damage output there too. And there wasn't much left of those towers in that Hag, so another quick lava field spell there just finished them off. Now we're back in high speed mode again to continue on now that we've sort of pretty much finished up the southern part of the map. So the name of the game here is building up the army. We're going to go into the northern part of the map where there are some fairly strong Era 4 units. You want to have a strong force to face them with. The toughest ones that you'll deal with in the north part of the Twilight Hulks, of course, and that's why I'm using a similar strategy to the nature replay of Encounters with Twilight, and I'm using a raiding party of Swamp Drakes to go in and take out towers, take out miscellaneous units, and to come back and do the heavy-duty damage on the Hulks with support of the rest of the army when the Wandering Hulks come in. Takes a little while to build up a force here, because you're just waiting for power. But now I've got enough Swamp Drakes that I can start going, and looks like we got our first pair of Hulks, and they didn't last very long there. I've also brought in a couple of Magma Spores. They're kind of troublesome to deal with, though. You want them going along with your flying units because you want them to be able to use their special attack on the ground. The problem is when you go in and you attack stuff with the flying units, they're a little bit harder to control. You have to micromanage them separately, so I have trouble with them. They end up dying pretty easily. So I tried keeping the Magma Spore on a separate control group, but then I forgot to use it except when it was with the other units. So that's just kind of a personal problem of mine, I guess. But it's something to watch out for when you're using Magma Spores. It's like having spells in your deck. You got to use them, or they're not worth having around. The Swamp Drakes are still going back and forth, spending a little time at the power well to heal up in between attacks, and I'm replacing things that I've lost. As these Twilight Hulks come in, they'll definitely stomp my drones into nothing, and occasionally they'll take out a Magma Hurler too, so I've also summoned some Shadow Insects, and hopefully I'll be able to use their Soul Shock ability, which does a fairly strong 500 damage, up to 500 damage. Notice here that if you don't have the walls up in the southern area, the Twilight Hulks don't come in here unless you pull them in. They will just wander off and continue in a circle around the northern area. So that's handy when you're using an approach like this, to leave the walls down so that you can control when the Hulks are coming in. The only time you really want to use those walls is when you're doing it defensively, although I have seen one replay that used the walls in the earlier part when you're attacking the southern units. They put some ranged units up on those walls and brought the Twilight Abomination up to the walls, and so the Abomination was attacking the walls while the ranged units were killing them. Kind of really a clever tactic, but usually you only use it when you're in defense mode on this map, when you use the Ami Screaming Stone to pull all of the Twilight at once into the large collection of towers and the welcoming committee that you have summoned to greet them. Okay, the swamp drakes now are continuing their hitting and running. Trying to angle them to get a good shot on the Twilight infestation that's in the center of the map. Once that Twilight infestation is down, no more hulks. So after I've got that down, I'll be able to move into the north part of the map and clear the rest of it out. The hulks keep coming though. They come pretty frequently, so you have to zip out there with the drakes as soon as possible. There's one guy that kind of hangs around in the west, but you could kind of avoid him. But the other ones, to keep patrolling, you have to clear the patrols before you can go on. And as the drakes are taking tower shots every time they go up there, I have to heal them when they come back down. Now it looks like I got two really quickly together there, so I should have a little bit of time to do some damage up here. So I can take out some units. There, another Twilight Hulk just spawned. But I took out that tower and took out a few units in the middle, and on my next pass I should be able to make an attack on the infestation. We get a little bit more aggressive moving into the middle here so that the swamp drakes will have some time to go in and make their hit and run attack. Here they just got it a little over half damaged before the Twilight Hulk turned around and started swatting at them, so I have to take them back to heal before I can go back. Now, I summoned some primal defenders in the south here, and the idea there was to give the Twilight Hulks something to beat on. It wasn't really to do damage to them. But it didn't quite work as well as I intended, and plus I forgot to destroy them for their void power. So that was bad on me. Swamp Drakes finished off the Twilight infestation, so no more Hulks. So now we can move all of the troops into the north. The first order of business here is to get rid of the last Twilight Hulk in the west, but also to take out that Twilight Skyscorcher tower, which I unfortunately moved my Swamp Drakes in on before it was completely destroyed, so I took a little damage there. Healed them up right quick. Now we get the ambush from the bugs, and the Swamp Drakes will help finish off that Twilight Hag in the west and that tower. But at this point, we're in pretty good shape. I got a big group of Magma Hurlers and Firestalkers there to drop buildings really quickly, and backed up by the Swamp Drakes, which can also do considerable damage to buildings in a big mob like that. Now my Firestalkers on their own kind of decided to attack a tower in the east there, which got the attention of this Twilight Dragon, but focusing everything on the dragon, he didn't last very long. And then I took care of the last tower. We're going to get the gold, and I'm going to bring up my fourth orb, which is going to be a Frost Orb. I only have one Frost card in the deck. It's an Era 4 unit, the Tempest, which is a pretty good one for a ranged attacker. It has a strong ranged attack. Its real strength, though, is in the extra damage that it gets to frozen units. So it's really not the best choice for this deck, because I don't have any other Frost cards in this deck, really. And the reason for that was that at the various tiers, I just ended up picking different elements that seemed more useful at the different tiers. Okay, a quick lava field there, and the last set of units is done for. And gonna grab that last power well and then build up my force. So yeah, at each tier, like for tier 1, I wanted the Wind Weavers. For tier 2, I wanted the Firestalkers, so I wanted a Fire Orb. For tier 3, no particular reason really to take Shadow at tier 3, but there really weren't any decent tier 3 Frost units either. So I did get the Stone of Torment and the Shadow Insect at tier 3. So I've got a Great Worm here. I got my fourth orb, so I can get all these Era 4 units. I'm heavy on Era 4 units in this deck, which is typical for a PvE deck because you need your heavy hitting to finish off the map usually. So I've got a Great Worm here, I've got Tempest, and I've got Ember Strikes coming in. Ember Strike is another kind of marginal choice for this deck. Its real strength is in the damage that it does when you summon it in, so you don't really want to summon it outside of combat. Also, it has a powerful special attack, which is a lot of micromanagement at Era 4. And I screwed up my entry here. I had summoned a Firestalker, which is a Swift unit that I had meant to be the first thing in for the boss, but he went after a dragon first. Fortunately, not my Great Worm. But all these ranged units I've got are just making mincemeat out of the spirits that are coming in. They can't get anywhere near the boss, and everything focused on the boss is just doing massive damage to it, and it's going to go down really quickly here. So there you have it. Encounters with Twilight with the Play for Free cards. I may continue this series. I'm actually currently attempting Siege of Hope, which, as you can imagine, is a real challenge with Play for Free cards because it requires some strong towers, which there aren't any in in the Play for Free deck, really. But I'll see what I can come up with. I hope you've enjoyed this replay, and I hope you find it helpful.